speaking of Ayuk playing well, obviously the guy throwing him the ball the most is going to be Trey Lance. And, we've been hearing different reports, Rohan, about Trey Lance. Some reports have shown that he's been struggling a little bit with his accuracy. He's thrown, quite a few interceptions on certain days. And then we also get the reports of him just being able to wow people with his, ability, with his athleticism, with his arm strength, arm talent as well. You're on the floor. You're on the ground. You're watching it day after day. Give us a Trey Lance progress report. Are the reports of him struggling true, overblown, or where would you grade him as far as what you've seen from him day after day?
Yeah, so I'm not a huge grades guy, right? But if we were to see and evaluate, the one point that I've been really stressing when I talk about Trey Lance, because I hate numbers right now. I'm the biggest numbers fan, and I hate the numbers. But when you talk about it, context is so important. Day one, Trey Lance threw 9 of 11. Swan Song just said it. That was not his best day. I like 9 of 11. Cool. But the reason was because it was such a small install that it was a bunch of checkdowns and a bunch of flats. And it's good that Lance is hitting those, but they were low or high percentage throws. So you expect him to hit it. I thought his best day was honestly when he threw 8 of 15. 53% completion percentage. Are you kidding me? That's what people tell me. But when you talk about it, overall, here's what the progress report is. Just really basing it off all the practices. Trey Lance is a scarily accurate deep thrower. Today was a bit different from the status quo. He wasn't as accurate deep, hence the 1 of 7 in regular scrimmage. But overall, in the status quo, Trey Lance has been a very good deep ball thrower. I'd put his completion percentage at above 50%, or around 50%. But I'd say, really, if we're talking pure accuracy, 75% of Trey Lance's deep throws so far, or 70%, somewhere around that 2/3 range, have been accurate. And that's very good for an offense that had struggled to really master that deep pass before. Now, where Trey Lance is struggling is in the other areas. He's in the intermediate field. Lance has thrown passes behind receivers. He's also thrown passes a little in front of receivers. So it's all about just getting the accuracy down in those areas, balancing touch, balancing arm strength, and all. But he's also had a couple of very nice throws. There was a day where he threw 20-yard passes, a good amount of them, a couple to Brandon Ayuk, one to Deebo Samuel. That was yesterday. He had a couple of good passes overall. And the point that I'm trying to stress right now, the 49ers are doing something different. They're wanting their quarterbacks to just try everything out. They're wanting their quarterbacks to really test themselves and don't care about the result. That's why Kyle Shanahan continuously says Trey Lance is having good practices, because it's not like you're throwing conservatively. You're testing everything, seeing how it works. That's why I even applauded Nate Sudfeld for trying to throw deep. There was one practice where Nate Sudfeld was horrendous horrendous completion percentage wise. 7 of 13, 3 interceptions. But he tried to throw it deep. I'm fine with that one practice being a wash because you can understand where Nate Sudfeld is throwing deep. He's just not that accurate, and that's fine. But overall, when you talk about statistics, you also have to provide context, and the context is Trey Lance is inconsistent, but he's also been fairly accurate deep when you take the overall numbers so far. It's just everywhere else where he kind of needs to improve. And also, I think he's going to develop more consistency when the offensive line develops more consistency.
Yeah, and I mean, to further on your theme of putting things into perspective, I think it was last season when Fred Warner was asked about Trey Lance. One of his criticisms of Trey Lance was that Trey in practice seemed a little hesitant to really take those shots, right? He didn't want to make a lot of mistakes. So his numbers always came back pretty good, but it was because he was taking more of the high percentage throws and not really showing what he was fully capable of as a quarterback. And that's probably like a confidence thing. Also just not being maybe as comfortable because he took a whole year off of football due to COVID. I think the fact that we are seeing Trey Lance even struggle a little bit, but it's because he's starting to take these chances and attempt everything that he's seeing on the field the defense give him. So it's still very early in camp, and I think one of the things, unfortunate parts of training camp, Rohan, is every day gets over analyzed. Every day, people have to write articles. People have to have their spicy titles. No pun intended with what the title of this video is, but so it gives a lot of pressure to athletes to not go out there and look bad, right? Because there's going to be a narrative that's created around it, especially with Trey Lance, who all offseason a narrative has been created. But I think the faithful should actually take, and it's kind of like what a lot of the guys in the comment section are saying, should actually take a lot of pride, or at least feel motivated by the fact that Trey Lance is still taking these shots, still attempting to get better at these weaknesses right now, because you want to get all of that done right now through practice versus being in the game and then being gun shy, being hesitant because you haven't really practiced it through training camp and in practice and whatnot. So I agree with you. I think the other thing you can take from this is the fact that he's attempting this shows a level of confidence that he's having this year that he didn't have last year, which is also a good sign.
Yeah, and I mean, when you talk about Trey Lance, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, right? He has struggled at times. That's what I prefaced the entirety of this of my speech on, right? But when you talk about Trey Lance, there are positives. There are things to be optimistic about. I just named it the one part where you can be optimistic about, and that's the deep passing. The other area is Lance is a runner, so like recently. So we saw Lance last year sometimes struggle with his running, and the reason was he was hesitant, right, to take off. He wanted to stay not only in the pocket, but even when he rolled out, he wanted to make a throw. He wanted to prove, right, that he's that pocket passer type of quarterback. But overall, Lance is really, really like he's much better when he lets instinct override his practice, and that's what happened yesterday. Lance didn't think. When there was the lane, he took off and he ran. And when he takes off and runs in that capacity, whereas when he hesitates a little more, he's much faster. I realized how fast Trey Lance truly was yesterday. Whereas when I was watching him in person week 16 and watching him on film throughout the rest of the year last year, I thought he was a lot I thought he was slower than I anticipated. Today was what or yesterday was what I expected with his speed. And that's also another positive because Trey Lance, I think, is finally getting comfortable. And really, I think it's fully dependent on the offensive line. Once the offensive line gets settled down and settled out, which it has been over the last couple of days, specifically over the last when pads have began, I think the offensive line has looked better, with its best day being yesterday. I think that Trey Lance will be the most comfortable that he'll be, and the 49ers offense will start moving because the run game will move. On top of that, because the run game is moving, the pass game will eventually move as well, you know?
Absolutely. So I guess the biggest thing, Rohan, to wrap up this topic, I know that there's been moments where he struggled. There's been moments where he's, wowed people. But are you seeing consistent progression day after day where you're seeing maybe Trey not make the same mistake multiple times and actually learn from maybe certain mistakes he's made earlier in practice or earlier in camp?
I can give one example. I mean, that's something that I think is still too early to tell, but one example in the real short term, Trey Lance's first two interceptions of camp. They were both the same exact interception. It was a Jimmy Garoppolo-esque interception. What do I mean by that? It was right. Lance just didn't see the rover right in the middle of the field, about 10 yards deep on both plays. The first play was to Jimmy Ward. He was just standing there. Lance was trying to hit a crosser, threw the pass behind the crosser, and Jimmy Ward was just standing there over the middle of the field and intercepted the pass. The second one was the exact same play. Lance tried to hit Ray McLeod. The pass was behind McLeod. It went right to the middle of the field where Fred Warner was standing there. Lance didn't see him again. And I don't obviously you don't know. Is it a miscommunication? I just based on the throw, regardless of the miscommunication, based on the throw, Lance was in the wrong on both of those. One thing I haven't seen though is an interception of that of like that any in the last couple of practices, right? Lance yesterday I think Lance yesterday did have one interception. I believe. I'm not. Ooh, I forget. I have to check my notes. But Lance didn't have a pick today. He was obviously 3 of 9, but had had a touchdown. You can count it as 2. I counted it as 1. You can count it as 2. In the red zone, he was fairly efficient in the red zone. And the one thing I'm surprised not only about Lance but also about other players, these guys are quick learners. Like I've seen a lot of improvement when one player was struggling one day and quickly turned it around the next day. And I'm not saying they've been consistent with that, but I've seen improvement which showcases potential of what they could be because they've shown positive reps.
I love